So you're welcome back to the Virtual Business Forum for the 2020 Citi Business Festival. My name is Vivian Kai Lokko. Now, over the period, we've had other virtual forums. We started with one on leadership, looking at rebooting your business. Then we moved to e-commerce. And then last week, we had one on agriculture. I'm sure you enjoyed it. But today is going to be exciting as well, talking about trade, which affects all of us. So you know what you can do? Call a friend, call a relative to join us and have this exciting conversation. Now, you can send your questions, your comments as well. You just have to add the hashtag Citi Business Festival if it's online, if it's on Facebook, wherever. And then later, we'll give you the number for WhatsApp to send a message. So let me introduce my guest today who will be joining us to have this conversation. Let me start with the women first. Let me start with Mrs. Ellen Ohene-Afoakwa. She's the Regional Corporate Director, West Africa for Absa Bank. Ellen, welcome.
Thank you, Vivian.
Then I also have David Ofosu-Dorte. He's a Senior Partner, AMB David Africa. David, welcome.
Thank you.
And then we'll be joined virtually by two gentlemen also well versed in the issues of trade. So I have Yofi Grant, is the CEO of GIPC. Yofi, if you can hear us, say hello or something.
Hello and a very good morning to you all.
Okay, good morning to you. And then I also have Michael Kottoh. He's with Confidence and is also a member of Afro Champions. Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Vivian.
Okay, and then we have quite a number of people who have joined us as well virtually. At a point, I'll bring them in for them to also ask their questions and also give us their comments as well. So let's start the discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And gentlemen, virtually, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So let's start with this COVID-19. There's a general comment from all of you. You know, it's come to stay. I was reading an article on China when it started. They were producing some amount of face masks, about millions of them. They virtually had to up their numbers. They got to a point they're receiving donations from other countries because they couldn't, you know, live up to expectations and all that. If you listen to some business persons, they've had to put on hold exports. Some also imports. Some have done it by stuck on the sea, some cargo-wise delays and all that. Very, you know, interesting developments happening. From your side, you deal with the businesses and all that, lending to them and all that. What has it been like in terms of COVID-19 around the trade area this period?
COVID-19 has really disrupted the global supply chain, Vivian, as you mentioned, and this is a concern as to where Africa's future market and trading opportunities will be. Trade and export demands have dwindled, and for some companies have skyrocketed. And for the first time in the history of the world, the price of West Texas Intermediates, that WTI, went into negative $37 per barrel as at April 2020. However, COVID-19 pandemic presents some opportunities, and African countries are now looking at self-sustenance. What can we do for ourselves? And we've seen that most of these African countries are now looking at what do we need, what are the essentials that we need. So they are focusing on manufacturing for food and agriculture, they're looking at pharmaceuticals, they're looking at PPE production, and I think that the African Continental Free Trade could not have come at a better time than now. As several African countries and economies are looking at how to really sustain themselves, self-reliance, how to look within. And I like what the president said. He said that we need to really inspire the expansion of domestic capability and deepen self-reliances. And I think it's really a great opportunity for us to look within ourselves, manufacture what we think we need, and look at exports to the sub-region.
Okay, so we'll look at the opportunities we can tap in and all that for Ghana, for SMEs, and even for Africa as a continent. But I want to bring in David now because, you know, David has this organization that, you know, they do the predictions for business environment over the period. I'm not sure he actually predicted the COVID-19 because none of us saw it, you know, coming. But David, from where you're sitting, what are you seeing in terms of the COVID-19 from, you know, last year? Were you expecting something like this, and how is it panning out from, you know, how you look at things?
I don't think anybody expected COVID-19. I mean, I don't think it's a good thing to expect. Of course, there are the pundits who for years have been predicting that the world will face another pandemic. And if you know the history of pandemics in the world, you know that we almost have a 100-year cycle. But with the advent of H1N1, SARS, one would have thought that we were not going to have another cycle. But then it came. I didn't see anybody predict COVID-19 at this time. But having said that, I mean, how COVID-19 impacts on the economy or impacts on us is not different from how it impacts on the individual. Okay. In my view, first it depends on the how depends on whether the underlying conditions for the individual, and so it is for economies. If you have underlying conditions, for example, if you have overborrowed, then certainly COVID-19 with a slowdown of the economy will impact you worse than it will if you don't have that type of structure. Or if you are America who can print money, I think there was an article done by the finance minister which alluded to that. If you can print money, the impact will not be the same as somebody who has to borrow money. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is how you respond to it, because in my view, no event, or I should say most events, are not as important as how you react to them. So our reaction actually dictates the extent to which the COVID will impact on us. Our reaction to how we manage our health, etc. How we manage our economy, for example, are we going to cut costs, etc. All those are impacts that we do face. So in my view, the general summary of my view about the question you asked broadly, I mean, to all the panelists, is there are some whose economy will remain the same. There are some whose economy will get worse, and there are some whose economy will get better.
I'm tempted to ask you about Ghana's economy. What are you looking at?
I think it will get worse. I think it will get worse. I don't think it will get better with COVID-19. So you're looking about the impact of COVID-19. I think it will get worse because underlying conditions are already there. It's not for only Ghana, for the rest of Africa. And I think the finance minister himself has indicated that. And when you look at the fact that production has fallen for many businesses, GDP is predicted to go low. That's from the 8% projected to less than 3%. It's already worse. I mean, you don't have to be a magician
to know that,
or do crystal ball to know that. So I think it will get worse, and there are hard times ahead.
Okay, so later I'm going to ask you how we can maneuver around this difficult period and how we can also take advantage of that. But let me bring in the FDI man who's been dealing with businesses across the world and also connecting Ghanaian businesses to businesses outside, and how he's seeing this pandemic and its impact on businesses in Ghana and, for that matter, outside. And what are some of the takeaways he's seen from the Yofi grant?
Well, I mean, definitely, the prior speakers have indicated the direction which the economy has gone. I mean, there are two major factors that have been has been disrupted by this pandemic. One is lives, and two is livelihoods. Lives, of course, is the health factor, that people are dying, people are dislocated, both physically and psychologically. And the livelihoods bit is where the trade, investment, and economic side of the impact is. And definitely with the closure of many borders, we saw a major disruption in trade and value chains. And China, being probably the biggest manufacturer in this world, was the first to be hit by the pandemic, and they closed their borders, and that meant that it was very serious for other countries who relied on China for their trade, especially their imports and some of the exports. And in Ghana, it's not been any different. We had we started a lockdown in Africa pretty early, and so at that moment there was a big argument. Oh, we should have done it much earlier. We should have done that, but that would have affected lives as well as livelihoods, because as people get infected and people are sick, they can't work. So factories are closing down, businesses are closing down, and at the same time the airport is closed down. So nothing comes in, nothing goes out, except the very bare essentials. And so that is a major impact factor in our economy. And as David said, we are going to see GDP from the projected 6.8 go down to somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5%. I mean, having said that, that is even much better than the sub-Saharan prediction, which is recession, some -2% recession. And compared to the rest of the world, the 1.5 is even, we are happy to have that. But yes, the impact is there. And the impact is in many ways. Once there was a lockdown, and people couldn't move about, businesses stopped, then it meant that government's revenue lifeline was cut. So government wasn't making any, wasn't collecting any more monies because businesses were not there to be able to pay those monies. And that in itself affected government. Not to mention that then government also had to step up its expenditure to make sure that we don't deviate too much from the normal. We can provide what is important to keep some of our people healthy, if not all, and then also what is important to keep some businesses going. And under some of the policies that were taken, which are strongly in consonance with the Ghana Beyond Aid, was to redirection some of the items that we erstwhile would have imported to local industry. So we had some some money allocated to those in the health sector first as incentives, and then also to those in the manufacturing sector, pharmaceuticals, textiles, etc., to provide those items, those PPE items that we required. The PPE, we had a number of companies manufacturing alcohol for hand wipes, sanitizers. We had many little companies in the textiles industry also manufacturing face masks for internal consumption. And this is an indication of where I believe the future bears bearing, because we now recognize that perhaps we should also look inwards. As we can't print money, government's resources are shrinking, and our economies are also shrinking. We need to look inwards and see how we can sort of curtail some of this shrinkage from our own resources. But bear in mind that Ghana, and largely the most of Africa, our economies are largely dependent on the export of raw materials and resources. In Ghana, for one, our main export commodities were cocoa products, gold, and now oil and gas, or oil products. And these resources are still there. So even post-COVID, they'll still be there. We haven't optimized those resources.
Yofi, I'll let you tell us what, for that matter, government is going to do in terms of value addition for these resources that over the years we've kept, exporting them at its, value, which is not good enough in terms of from other markets. For example, there's so much the home of, manufactured chocolates. You think that Ghana should be driving that. We've had a lot of interventions aimed at making sure that we become, leads for that. We've still not seen anything. If COVID has taught us anything at all, perhaps it's taught us that we should fast track our plans, to change the narrative around what we are exporting as a country.
Absolutely.
So I'll come to you in a bit on the clear policies and details that you put in place to fast track that, and it won't be just talk. But let me bring in Michael, who is also the trade guy, to tell us his general idea about this COVID-19 pandemic and its implications on the trade area. Michael.
Thank you, Vivian, and I totally agree with the initial comments by my colleague panelists. And, just as they've said, COVID it's been a disruptor, and aside the cost to lives, livelihoods, one of the major outcomes of COVID is the COVID-19 pandemic is that it's been a big disruptor. And as we try to grapple and make sense of its impact, I think we should keep this word in mind, because there's a lot of lessons we can draw from it. And I will come back to some of those later on in the discussion. What COVID-19 has turned out to be is a sort of a natural experiment. Turned out to be a natural experiment across several areas of life, economy and politics and global diplomacy. Things that we thought to be absolutely unthinkable, almost impossible, have turned out to be the case. And there's so many implications of this going forward for businesses, for countries, especially nations in Africa, in terms of how we rethink our entire approach to our position in the world economy. And later on in the discussion, I will speak to some of those. So that's the first point for me. It's been a disruptor, but more importantly, it's been a natural experiment. Things that were unthinkable have happened. And what does that mean for all of us, businesses and nations, as we forge forward? The third point for me is that there's no point crying over spilled milk.
Okay.
The cost and damage that COVID-19 has wrought is what it is. And so we need to be forward-looking. And in being forward-looking, it's important to stop counting our losses and our costs. We've got to focus more on the opportunities that COVID-19 has made obvious, and strategize and strike as quickly as we can those that we need to move very fast in order to be able to take advantage of. And again, subsequently in the discussion, I'm sure we will talk a lot more about some of those opportunities.
Okay.
The initial comment I want to make is that we still don't know what lies ahead. And that's a very important point. If we can all remember, if we cast our minds back to a few months back, when this pandemic struck in China in January, the rest of the world looked at this as a Chinese problem. And it looked like something that could be contained in the same way that SARS, and all the others were dealt with. Then it spread around the world. And especially in the last 4 months, when it went everywhere, virtually everywhere in the world, the way in which we have assessed the situation in real time has always been like, oh, we're almost done with this. So initially we used a Chinese response in 2 months, the lockdown was over, and everybody thought that, 2 months, we should be okay and get back to life. Mm-hmm. As we speak, China is already dealing with the second wave.
Yeah.
Locking down several parts of Beijing. And in Africa, the lockdown, so the point is that the fact that the lockdowns have been lifted and life seems to be getting back to normal doesn't necessarily mean that we're out of this. And we keep saying that, it's almost about, we can adjust, and we keep talking about life post-COVID. Well, as we strategize about post-COVID, we should also think about living with COVID and life with COVID, business with COVID, and think about the possibilities that this situation may be with us for quite an extended period of time, possibly the next 1 or 2 years. And to think about how to adapt.
2 years, Michael, that's a long time.
But it's possible. It's very possible.
Okay.
And you see, we started 2020 and nobody could have predicted that this would happen.
That's right.
So we don't even know what life is in the next 6 months.
Okay.
There could be a second pandemic, not COVID, something completely different.
Okay.
It's possible.
So I get your point.
Yes. And later in the discussion, I'm sure we'll get the opportunity to
look at that. So I'll take off from your point about it's happened, it's here with us. We should even prepare for a longer term around whether it's staying or not, and take off from there and say, okay, so it's here with us, it's what it is. Ghana and Africa, how do we navigate around this period? Because Michael says it's here. No need to be crying over spilled milk and behaving like babies. Oh, we've lost this. Oh, our revenues are going to do. How are we going to navigate now and then take it from there? David, let me start with you on that.
Okay, I think I made a point earlier, which I think Yofi also kind of alluded to. It has to do with how you react to issues. Yeah. And reacting to issues, I never cease emphasizing, depends a lot on your strategy, and strategy itself depends on the rank of the ladder you occupy. Mm-hmm. So you have to look at it in those steps and look at how can Ghana strategize. Michael has just said that there are a lot of opportunities that we should focus on, but you have to look at opportunities from an angle that it is either created, is tapped into, or optimized.
Okay.
You need to see opportunity that way. And when opportunity is created, it consists of a conscious effort to bring about that which is not there. But that's not the nature of COVID. COVID just hit us from nowhere. And it hit at a time when Africa had the best opportunity. Yeah. We had the opportunity to just start the CFTA gradually, and over the next 5 years, we are going to ramp up to a $3.4 trillion economy, etc. And then from nowhere, there is this disruption that we are all referring to. So when that happens, you need to jump from just creating an opportunity to tapping into an opportunity or optimizing that which is existing. And you tap into an opportunity which has resulted from the very crisis. So if you take, for example, the pharmaceuticals, the PPs we are all referring to, are we really tapping into it? I don't think so. We appear to have tapped into it temporarily to enable us meet the shortage in demand for PPs, etc. But for you to tap into it and optimize it, which are the two other factors I talked about, you need to be, for example, regionalizing. Maybe it is happening at the policy level. Yofi is a better person to talk about that. Maybe it's happening and I have not been aware. But I would like to see more announcements regarding a coordinated approach, for example, to the production of pharmaceuticals, domesticated. There is also something that COVID did that we seem to be missing. I think Michael is perhaps more hopeful on that than I am. He seemed to say that opportunities that we can still tap into. I think we are almost missing it. It is that very window, and I think I actually heard Michael relate to this on one of your earlier shows, where the world looked away, and everybody was looking into themselves. That was an opportunity for Africa to break the yoke that has always been on us, the fact that we always have to look elsewhere. But if you look at the coordinated Africa response, it was more related to how do we borrow to actually solve the problem that had been created, instead of how do we leverage that opportunity to build wealth locally by domesticating.
How come we missed that? Is it because we're used to the borrowing narrative?
Because what we forgot, and what we seem to be still forgetting, that after the disease, there will be death.
Yes.
And that's a very important point.
Yes.
And if one country has already shown that, that is Zambia. Zambia has already announced a debt restructuring of $11 billion. Our debt is higher. That of Nigeria perhaps is maybe much higher. So collectively, we are faced with a debt that is going to be made worse by the less production, the less taxes, and the fact that we have had to borrow more as a result. And I don't think we've emphasized on creating the additional wealth creation that will have managed the debt gap that we already have. So I think that's where we are almost at the point of missing, and probably we may have to do a bit more about that.
All right, so Yofi, perhaps you would want to react to that.
Yes, I certainly like to. I'm not that pessimistic, or I definitely, I mean, we have to learn to live with COVID, as Michael said, because we still don't have the wherewithal to contain it, but I'm sure that will come soon, sooner than expected. I mean, that's human endeavor, and if you look through history, there have been many such instances. For example, the Spanish flu, which probably killed about 50 million people, the bubonic plague across Europe, but in all those cycles, the world changed to adapt. And I believe that we are going to see that as well. But for Africa, I think this still remains a unique opportunity to recalibrate. Because look, prior to this, if you look at the 10 fastest growing economies in the world, 6 were from Africa. It's a marked departure of what was 3 decades before. But if you look to the future, and I keep saying this, by 2020, Africa will be 1/4 of the world's population. The demography will be that close to 60% of that number will be less than 35 years old. So that could provide the labor required for growth in the next global financial wave of growth, as well as a new market for the world. But also Africa, like you said, 10 fastest, 6 are from Africa. It means that the African countries themselves are recognizing opportunities which before might have been there, but they didn't recognize. But from our point of view, from the Ghana point of view, I think that we have, to some extent, been preparing the grounds to sort of stymie the disruptive effects of such incidents through policies. And so when the first time I heard Ghana Beyond Aid, I thought, wow, that's amazing. That is a story that should resonate across Africa. We need to start looking at ourselves and not finance ourselves in handouts, gifts, and these when we have all that is required on the continent. And then back to the Africa story. Beyond the population, over 30% of the global resources, mineral resources in the world, are in Africa, including lithium, which is a much sought for mineral for Industry 4.0. Most of the deposits are in Africa. So that demand will always be there, and Africa will always be important in that equation. Not to mention gold, not to mention bauxite, not to mention iron ore. And gold is important now because people are moving out of cash and going to gold as a store of value. And so the African countries that are in gold, and gold is our #1 export as we speak. Those countries with gold have a unique advantage. Oil was a bit tricky because of some of the pre-COVID developments meant a virtual collapse in the oil industry. We've seen the prices go back up. And so it's as countries recalibrate and have to get back into the new normal, getting the economies going, I believe that the demand will still be there. In Ghana, we have done quite a number of things.
Yofi, you need to position yourself properly because we're getting some feedback. Probably feels like you're touching your mic or something. If you can do that for me.
No, I'm actually working on a laptop. So
okay, so I'll come back to you. So we'll figure out how to rectify that because it caused a bit of disruption here. So while you're doing that, I'm going to ask Ellen. She's been dealing with businesses, you know, struggling to, you know, make things work for them in this COVID-19 era and all that. And then from what Michael said earlier, where we had David and Yofi take off in terms of stop complaining and just zoom in and move it with it. What do you think about that, and how you're, you know, working with your companies or companies you lend to or deal with to position themselves properly around this period?
Yeah, I think every crisis presents an opportunity. So I think that the COVID-19 presents a huge opportunity that we need to be deliberate and also put in strategies to really make sure that we take an advantage of. For me, I think that there's an opportunity for us to upskill and collaborate. We need to look at our strengths and leverage on that as Africa. Can you imagine that Africa has about 50% of the world's arable land? What are we going to use that for? Can we then be deliberate about it and decide that we're going to really cultivate this and provide the food that we eat and stop the over $430-something million that Ghana alone imports for rice? We need to look at that. Our arable land is key. Then we also need to look at irrigation. We have a lot of land that we can put under irrigation. Ghana has only 10,000 hectares of land under irrigation. We have almost 346,000 hectares of land we can put under irrigation. So for me, agriculture is key, #1 for me. Then also the agro-processing industries. How do we get our businesses to add value to what we produce? We are producing so much as a country and as a continent. How do we add value to it so that we can also export to the other regions? It will interest you to know that by 2050, 65% of the world's population, Africa's population, will be urban. What advantage are we taking as Africans with all the arable land that we have? We can go into food processing. We can also go into textiles, as Yofi mentioned. We can also look at even our cereals. Can we use it for the brewery industry and all that? So I think there are huge opportunities that we need to also look at. And in ABSA, we are also looking at how do we support SMEs, because in Ghana and in Africa in general, 85% of the businesses are SMEs. So at ABSA, we don't only provide financing for SMEs, and we also go further to ensure that we equip them with the capacity that they need, then also ensure that they also network and be able to take advantage of the business and the markets available. We link them up with the multinational corporates so that through the value chain, they can now be able to take up that opportunity there and be able to really produce. I think that COVID presents us with a lot of opportunity. It's about how we look at it, whether we want to see the glass as half full or half empty.
Okay.
Thank you.
When we come back, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look into detailed opportunities, because I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to that, how they can tap into the opportunities. David has given us 3 types of opportunities. He will zoom in on which one he thinks is best for us as Ghanaian businesses and for those in Africa and all that. But remember, this show, or the Business Festival, is sponsored by ABSA, and ABSA wants you to download the new ABSA Bank app to check your balances. You can pay your bills, you can also transfer online and as well shop online. So stay safe while banking with ABSA. It's also supported by GIPC, which Yofi Grant heads. Now, the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, it says to its customers that and its clients that it's continuing with its services, which includes new registrations, company renewals, exemption processing, automatic expatriate quota applications, and technology transfer agreement applications. Now, for further information, you can contact pr@gipc.gov.gh or our social media handles. That's the Ghana GIPC on Facebook and GIPC Ghana on Twitter and Instagram. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
COVID-19 has changed the world. But despite the challenges we face, the spirit of Africanacity is still alive. It's in the tenacity of the men and women who are still keeping us safe and keeping us going. It's in the creativity you use to find new ways to work, teach, do it all, and stay together, even if you're apart. And it's in the ingenuity of all those who are making a difference. Thank you to everyone still getting things done. Your Africanacity inspires us.
I am Nana Dr. Michael Ejekum Ado, the founder, chairman, and the CEO of Kama Group and Mikado Holdings Limited. I am a pharmacist and I am into pharmaceuticals. I also run conference centers and guest houses, plus microfinance and forest bureau. I believe Ghana is a fertile land for businesses. I encourage local and foreign investors to come to Ghana. They should choose Ghana as their first destination. Ghana is so good because one, is peaceful, the staffing, that is the human beings, are reliable, they are intelligent to work with. Ghana has all what it takes to run your business. Please, grow in Ghana, grow with Ghana.
And of course, this is Citi TV and you're watching our virtual business forum. This one is on trade. My name is Vivian Kai Lokko. You can join the conversation. You can send us a message on +233 55 058 5832. That's +233 55 058 5832. You can also send us a message via Facebook or Twitter. Just ensure you add hashtag Citi Business Festival, and when your question or your comment comes in, I'll gladly read it and also direct it to our panel here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So let's now look at the opportunities proper for Ghanaian businesses and also for the African continent. I don't know who will go first with that, because I know you guys have so many opportunities in mind to share with us. So since Michael has been quiet for a bit, Michael, you take it from there with the opportunities.
And as far as opportunities are concerned, it depends on where you sit and which sector you occupy. There are some opportunities that are very immediate, and there are, if you want to look at it as crisis opportunities to provide the kinds of services and goods that are required to fight the pandemic and get countries and businesses and economies back on stream. So those who have been producing the sanitizers and the face masks and the Veronica buckets and the other PPEs, those are all examples of like very immediate opportunities that it's fascinating because, you know, it's like virtually every seamstress in this country has learned to adapt quickly, and they are all producing face masks. I think that's beautiful. Okay. A lot of alcoholic beverage factories retooled very quickly and adapted, and they are producing sanitizers. I think that's brilliant. But outside of these immediate ones, I think from an opportunity point of view, the key thing is to, again, for me to think about it in terms of, you know, what I alluded to initially as a natural experiment. And the opportunity for localizing a lot of what we currently import, I think, is the biggest opportunity we face now as a country. And it applies to every sector: food production, agro-processing, pharmaceuticals, clothing, textiles. These are some of the very obvious immediate ones. And if you're a business and you are in any of these sectors, the way to think about these opportunities, and part of what I spoke about in my first conversation with Bernard a few weeks ago, is that there's a temporary disruption in global supply chains. That disruption is temporary. It is important to keep in mind that it's temporary. And because it is temporary, there's a temporary window of opportunity that has been created. And it's important for businesses to understand that you need to move quick, because slowly and gradually, the global economy is getting back on stream. Countries are easing border closures gradually and slowly. And you hear about all the different kinds of possible economic recoveries we could have. One of the common ones in global business, what global business really wants, is the possibility for what they call a V-shaped recovery. Okay. I hear that we're going to have a quick rebound. Now that should tell you the psychology of global business. All the global businesses that run the global supply chains that we're talking about are looking for a quick, immediate rebound. Okay. So the way they're thinking about this is very aggressive. And if you're a business person in Ghana, and there are these temporary windows of opportunities for you to fill certain niches in the market, simply because global supply chains are restrained, you've got to be aggressive as well. Okay. And being aggressive goes beyond just producing a few products simply, you know, to supply and meet a few shortfalls in supply here and there. You've got to think about things very comprehensively. So, as I said in my first conversation with Bernard, no business really has what it takes in terms of the resource mobilization and deployment and execution that's required to be able to strike and take advantage of these opportunities within this very short period of time. It's probably the next 3 months or the next 6 months. Okay. And therefore, you need to think about partnerships. Okay. And partnerships then become a resource on their own. You don't think it's not an option. You can take care of a few opportunities, but if the restrictions ease and global supply chains rebound, you don't have a chance. You don't stand a chance. That's right. Because there can be a scale of production and a pricing that you can't compete with. But if you can merge forces locally, you have a better opportunity to be able to work with government and get the right level of support that is required. And so if you take pharmaceuticals, for example, and that's one area that I keep hitting on, the Ghanaian pharmaceutical manufacturers need to come together, because none of them individually has what it takes to produce at that scale. So we need to see consortiums being formed in the manufacturing sector in order to work with government, because government has extended a hand of support to the pharmaceutical sector. But they need to come as a consortium, as opposed to individual entities trying to access that support, because we cannot be competitive in that way. The same opportunity applies across the agriculture and food and agro-processing sector. And CTF and you guys have done a fantastic work advocating for made in Ghana production, especially around rice, for example. Okay. We need to find ways of synergizing these opportunities. Planting for food and jobs would have to be retooled as one of the strategic opportunities to take advantage of the CFTA as we prepare for CFTA start of trade, for example. And how you do that, single individual businesses can do their own, but as a country, we need a strategy to be able to bring all the key players together to strike and take advantage of these opportunities. Now, if you think about what will happen once the CFTA takes off, that's a whole new ballgame. CFTA, and I think part of the challenge when we talk about the opportunities of the CFTA is that a lot of Ghanaian businesses tend to wonder, okay, does it mean that I have to go and find a buyer in Zambia or Kenya and have to go through all the hassle of exporting and shipping my goods to these countries? If you're thinking about the CFTA in that sense, you are going to be overwhelmed. Because as a small SME in Ghana, if you have to think through the logistics of what it takes to produce and find foreign buyers and take care of shipping and logistics, and that's tough. And a lot of people just retreat and decide to focus on the local market. But that's not the way to think about the CFTA and international trading opportunities. The more important way to think about it is how you internationalize your products, not necessarily your business and your operations. So internationalizing Ghanaian production will then open up opportunities for trade intermediaries. And that's one area where I think Yofi and another key players like the Ghana Export Promotion Authority would need to do a lot more work. How we try and incubate more trade intermediaries. Trade intermediation is going to be our biggest challenge in terms of our ability to take advantage of the AFTA. Because Ghanaian producers, they ought to specialize in production. They just need to specialize in producing and manufacturing and adding value. The job of another intermediary to go across the continent, to go and find the buyers, to go and sign up the contracts, to go and negotiate the deals, and then come back to this country and say, I want 6 factories that can produce pineapple juices or mango juices at this price, at this standard, at this packaging. And it's a contract production. They produce it, you brand it. Ghanaian producers do not have to contend with the challenge of having to go to 6 countries to go and look for markets. And at the moment, I think that's the challenge that we face. So we need to support our local producers to just specialize in producing more efficiently, adding value. We need to help them to understand which sectors and product categories within the CFTA the opportunities are. And then what we need, in my opinion, is to incubate, because we don't have a lot of them, the likes of export trading companies and trade intermediation entities who specialize in going all over the continent and looking for the contract and simply coming to contract our producers to produce, and then they go and market them. And just a quick one, in this sense, I have a suggestion for Yofi, and Yofi is an enterprising man who comes from industry, so he gets it. That I think one of the things we need to get between the GIPC and the Foreign Affairs Ministry, I think you guys need to be working together more closely than you do at the moment. All the Ghanaian missions across this continent should not really be doing standard diplomatic work. I mean, that's not really what we need them to be doing. We need to be hiring more marketers than diplomats, and staffing our foreign missions with more business people, marketers, investment people than standard diplomats, people who are training, just doing diplomatic work. I know that in diplomatic training, they're also trained to do commercial work and prospecting and all of that, but the psychology is different. So part of what we need to do as a country, if we really want to take advantage of the CFTA, is that all the Ghanaian High Commission's members across this continent and beyond should really be converted into serious business marketing operations.
Okay.
And for that to happen, we need to begin to hire more marketers and more business people to staff our foreign missions than diplomats. I know the diplomats are not going to be happy with me.
They surely won't be happy with you. So let's see what Yofi's reaction to that, and then also look at the opportunities if we can. Michael, yes. We'll return to you in a bit.
Yes, I'm sure it will please Michael to know that GIPC works extremely closely with the Foreign Ministry. Indeed, I actually sit on the advisory board of the Foreign Ministry. Okay. But beyond that, the Foreign Ministry itself has set up the Economic, Commercial, Trade and Investment Bureau called ECTIB, who we work with on a daily basis on our missions and all that. But even beyond that, I travel with the Foreign Minister. I travel with the President. I travel with sometimes the Finance and Economic Minister, all blending into a new policy of economic diplomacy. Indeed, if you go to the Foreign Ministry right now, the buzzword there is economic diplomacy. So they are constantly engaged, and we do training for all the ambassadors before they leave to their missions. And so they are aware of that new drive of where we are going to. And so that's a very positive bit about Ghana as a country. But I must, at this point, also indicate that as a government, the policy to localize and indigenize started 3 years ago actually. 3 years ago, we started what we call the Business Regulatory Reform Project, which was a 3-year to 4-year initiative to first of all remove all the bottlenecks for businesses, both from foreign direct investors and indigenous businesses, to smoothen the path of business, because we had an approach that we should establish Ghana as a hub for the sub-region and then for the region. And it was no surprise that Ghana was selected to host the headquarters of the CFTA, because it was seen that we had already started putting measures in place. Our economy was one of the fastest growing in the world, if not the fastest at some point. And so we had started a policy framework to do that. Now, there are 3 main policies that we implemented to redirect our economy. First, an industrialization policy under the One District, One Factory, where each district would have a manufacturing or value addition entity, whether it's small or large, at every nook and cranny of the country. That alone spread us into the sub-region. Secondly, planting for food and jobs, to ensure that we had food security, because if you're a country and you don't have food security, it becomes extremely difficult for you to do anything else. The third was to put in place a plan for an integrative transportation system of rail, road, water and air, to ensure that we were connected internally, such that if we started manufacturing internally, we could actually market, there was distribution. And then lastly, technology. The fact that we are trying to put across and complete a fiber ring around the country such that we are technologically connected. And I think one of the great opportunities for Ghana comes in technology. And the new normal is that people may not be traveling back and forth like before. Data is available. It is the way you access that data and maximize it, optimize it to do that. And in that frame, I believe that we were preparing for this. Nobody preempted COVID, but all these policies were in place. In recent times, an interministerial committee has been formed that includes the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, the Minister of Trade and Industry, the Minister of Agriculture, the Minister for MESTI, it's long, so I choose to call it MESTI, and the Minister for Planning and Energy. And it's supposed to look at the COVID period, the recovery for COVID, and then post-COVID recovery to soften our landing and get us back onto the track on which we were before. But obviously, regionalization was a very big part of our plan to ensure that we regionalize. Now, on the back of that too is a 10-point industrial policy where certain sectors were identified as anchors. For example, pharmaceuticals, for example, the gas industry for plastics, fertilizer, etc., the textiles industry, food processing and agro-processing, automobile and automotive industries. And what is going to happen is that industrial zones are going to be set. Indeed, the plan is to have an industrial zone in each region. Okay. And some of them have already taken off, which will harbor and incubate and grow these businesses. And on the back of these businesses will be the trade linkages. And yes, what Michael said is very important. Partnership is extremely important. If you look at the number of investors who came in the first quarter of this year, overwhelmingly, they were all going to manufacturing. because what has been done is to smoothen the path of manufacturing in the economy to make sure that we replace the export of raw materials and resources with value-added goods. Because if you look at Africa, Africa's trade is such that we import a lot more than we export. We import finished goods and we export raw materials. And I think that definitely that needs to be reverted, switched around totally. We should export processed goods and then import the raw materials we need to process those goods, such that we are operating at the higher end of the value chain. So I think that Ghana has set a good trajectory on that. On the back of that too, the Ghana Export Promotion Agency is undertaking a major study on Ghana's trade and export strategy. We keep looking at it. It's a living document, and you look at it as matters happen. So, for example, we thought we were going to be a major oil and gas exporter till this major disruption happened. How do we quickly look at other opportunities which are there, which may soften that expectation that we have? Because government revenues are cut, expenditures are high, there must be new measures in the market to make sure that we soften our drive into the future. And I think Ghana very much has it. The government so far has done pretty well. And if you look at the single window system at the ports, for example, is to ensure that we have a smooth, seamless trade facilitation thing. And by the way, the expansion at Tema makes Tema Harbour the biggest harbour in Africa with 3.7 million TEUs. Okay. That is certainly in preparation for a more industrial country that is going to focus a lot more on trade and not just export of its raw materials and resources.
Okay.
We recently got a new airport. Yeah. We are looking to build another airport, which is logistics based, a much bigger international airport, which will be logistics based. And we received quite significant interest from quite a number of countries who are looking at it.
Okay. Your sessions look like we're very well prepared to tap into the opportunities, but let me find out from David, who is well vexed to answer that question, whether we are, and then he also takes off with opportunities. And Ellen, I'll come to you in a bit. David, it sounds all nice from what he's saying.
I'm not so sure whether I'm the one well vexed to answer
that question.
Don't
run away from that question.
But having said that, I mean, Yofi and I speak a lot, and he was making me smile because Ghana is noted for two very good things. Okay. One is our ability to plan very well. Okay. And I'll tell you a story which may surprise you. At a very young age, in 1993, I happened to have been in a different profession, okay. And I was with a delegation that went to Cote d'Ivoire after a problem between Kottoh and Asek Mimosa. Okay. An Ivorian minister told me that we plan very well and they implement. That's a fact. So we plan very well. So he's spot on. The other thing is that we just don't plan. We prepare very well, but we are unable to leverage it. Okay. So there are a lot of things that Ghana have done before. We used to be the world's largest producer of cocoa until Cote d'Ivoire took over. I can go on and on and on and on.
So many examples.
So everything he said is right. What I'm not seeing is our galvanizing the businesses to leverage it. And let me give you some examples relating to opportunities. Okay. The urban food import is $35 billion in Africa. And Yofi himself said that we have the largest urban population, which is true. Yeah. What I would like to see is how, as a nation, we are not only regionalizing, but coordinating to say that we want our local producers of food to actually move on from the successful planting for food and jobs, which I agree with him, to leverage to value addition. And there's a specific target of that 35 billion we want to leverage, and that APSA will finance it. Ellen is here. Ellen is here. That's the kind of thing I want to see. Yeah. Because without that, the Atagi, which is now being processed, the Kobe, which is now being packaged, we cannot leverage that into the wider market. That is the way then you link it to what Michael has said, and you have the economic advisory team that he's working with. Yeah. Go to Zambia, Nigeria, and create a market for Kobe. That's what I want to see. Maybe he's doing that I haven't seen. If you come to the pharmaceuticals, the pharmaceutical market currently is $286 billion per annum. Michael talked about coming together and creating to take a specific part of that market. I haven't seen that. Recently, about the top 5 or 10 Fortune 500 CEOs were interviewed. I read it. Sadly, now spoke about Africa. So there is a lot of traditional thinking even out there, still looking at Asia and alternate to China in terms of Vietnam, Thailand as the alternate supply chains. We have to consciously create ourselves as the new supply chain to make the successful harbor implementation that you're talking about very relevant. And I will end on one note. it requires a fundamental change in thinking, which I know is going on, but we need to translate it to the masses. And let me give you one example. I would like to hear less of foreign direct investments. Not because we don't need it, we do. And you talked about it. A large part of foreign direct investments has come and is going to the manufacturing sector. That is okay. But I would like, for example, to see Yofi organize a domestic direct investment conference, pulling together to see what is it that the local people are doing, because they are doing things. But if we don't leverage, if we don't market it, they don't feel the impetus to actually know that this is being done. It's already happening. And if you don't leverage that, we will realize that at the end of the COVID, somebody comes to overtake us just as they overtook us in cocoa. That's my worry.
Wow. Yofi.
That's a quick point.
Yes.
That's a quick point there. It may please David to know that all our external missions will go with Ghanaian local business people, so that those who are in need of investment can directly meet the investors out there and create their deals before they come in here. But yes, indeed, you are absolutely right. It's how to galvanize all these into one funnel that makes it strategic and functional in growing the economy. And I dare say that under this current dispensation, the private sector is really the main impetus for economic growth. I mean, from long, we've always said it's the engine of growth, but it was an engine that didn't have oil or petrol. Now we want to create a holistic approach to private sector. And very soon you will see much more efforts. And indeed, just to tell you how much we engage on the private sector, I'm sure you've seen our Grow in Ghana adverts, one what was shown during the break time, where we are highlighting that there are Ghanaian business people who have done well here. The usual refrain I hear from most of the Ghanaian people when we talk to them about a possible investment opportunities, and rightly so, is the lack of capital. And I have said this many times that over the past decades, Ghana has not had a strategic orientation of fostering capital formation for the longest time. I mean, we've been exporting cocoa for close to 100 years, gold for same. We haven't yet developed one billionaire out of these. That is just important. I mean, it's absolutely bizarre. This is the time where we should make sure that we are creating billionaires out of our natural resources, whether it's aluminium, whether it's iron ore, whether it's oil, whether it's cocoa, whether it's cashew, and I believe it's very possible. It all depends on the sort of strategic focus and the policy framework that we do into it. And that is why we are doing the business regulatory reforms and the ease of doing business reforms to remove a lot of those things. Sometimes some of these reforms also go against what might be seen as the political economy. But I think that it's also an issue of communications. And once we communicate it right, people will understand what it is. We've seen a lot of developments in this country on the back of foreign direct investment, so that will also still be key. And once we are not generating enough businesses, government revenues are not going to grow enough to fund infrastructure, etc., etc. So foreign direct investment will continue to be important. But we also need to strengthen our local economies. I mean, and yes, the banks are there. But if you look at the banks, all the banks put together, one single obligor limit, it probably might not even be 100 billion. So how does this fund oil and gas, for example? How does it fund a major aluminium integrated aluminium industry? They'll only be a part of it. We want banks that will grow and can fund very significant sections of the economy, and that is all investment.
I think Ellen should come in at this point, talking about capital formation, banks getting involved and all that, and what ABSA has a plan for that, and then you come into the opportunities bit.
Thank you, Vivian. The banks, there's a lot of, should I say, that cooperation between banks. ABSA, for instance, has a cooperation agreement with Sogen that they are able to finance and also support about 33 countries in Africa. I don't think the issue is about capital. It's about where our focus is, what we want to do, and where do we want to put our energies. For the banks, I must say that banks are providing support for all the infrastructure activities that are going on. It's about what we want to do as a continent, as a business, and where we want to focus on. We have strengths that I think we need to leverage on to be able to really industrialize and also grow as African economies. ABSA, for instance, has a huge balance sheet. We finance a lot of projects across Ghana, Africa, and all over. How do we harness that huge balance sheet to grow businesses in Ghana? We are providing 500,000 unsecured lending to SMEs. Vivian, it will interest you to know how many SMEs are accessing this. This is unsecured. Just come in, tell us what you want to do, and we are ready to support you. We have what we call enterprise supply chain development, which is really just making sure that our multinational value chain, if you're an SME and you want to do business with multinational, we look at it and find a contract for you. Want to get that contract. If you're able to deliver, all that you need to do is speak to us, deliver that, and the multinational will pay us back. This one, financing, I don't think is the main issue. The main issue is we being focused and making sure that we have the infrastructure to really ensure that businesses grow. Come to think of it, tomato is grown in all the way Bolga. The transportation cost of bringing tomato to Accra is more than the cost of the tomato itself. It becomes so difficult, so we need to look at our infrastructure, and banks are ready to support. Then also we have what we call the export credits backed agency transaction, what we call the ECs. If you really are a business that you really need support for, let's say, equipment and all that you need to do is to tap into that. There are several of them that we can help you tap into it, and they have longer tenors, and also you have flexible interest rates that we can help you assess. Currently, the US has 300 million available. Ask me how many people are tapping into that. So I think the banks are very ready, and ABSA has the balance sheet and also has the expertise to really support Ghana develop. It's as to where do we want to focus, where do we want to tap into, and I think that is what we need to be thinking about now. There are huge opportunities out there. We need to really get focused and know that this is what we want to do, and be able to execute and measure ourselves. And as David said, I think execution has been the challenge for us as a country. We need to really be able to execute and measure our success. And with that, I'm sure we'll be able to develop as a continent and as a country.
Okay.
Thank you.
David, I'll come to you to react to that. But you can join the conversation. You can send us a message via WhatsApp on +233 55058 5832. That's +233 55058 5832. You can also send us a message via Facebook or Twitter. Just add the hashtag Citi Business Festival, and we'll take your questions or your comments. And I must say that we can see our guests also who's joined us via virtual means. We can see Emmanuel Amfo. We can see quite a number of others. And welcome. And in a bit we'll take your questions. But David, Helen says there's a lot of money available. We're seeing the money, the issues of capital not being accessible and all that. If the money is there, people want to, move to the next stage and all that. Why are we finding it difficult to make progress?
I think it's one of the fundamental issues we suffer from as a nation is lack of a coordinated approach to things and a coordinated approach to even thinking. Because even within the public sector, you find that at times one ministry is acting across purpose to the other. So you have to constantly create interministerial committees to solve that problem, which is the kind of thing Yofi was alluding to. It's even worse in the private sector, where people are individualized. They are happy to own 100% of one instead of 10% of 100. I mean, we all talk about those things. So to solve that problem, what we need to create, and again, I'll go back to Yofi and what he drives, is the ability to get people constantly encouraged that, look, you can come together, the market is here, there is a finance opportunity from ABSA, they have $300 million for unsecured credit, because people, if we speak to any typical businessman, and both Yofi and Ellen have said the same thing, they will talk about access to capital as their first problem, cost of capital as their second problem. Now, there are a couple of things that are important also that we don't emphasize enough. That has to do, for example, with the cost of production as a whole. I mean, if you take the manufacturing that we are talking about, so far as the cost of power, in terms of the unit of power at feed-in tariff remains around 13 cents per kilowatt hour, our products are not going to be as competitive as that of a Chinese product, because they are buying it at 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Yeah. So you need a coordinated approach where the financiers, the ABSAs of this world, and there are many, other financiers ABSA will syndicate or coordinate with, you mentioned Sojan as an example, would then liaise with the Yofis of this world to then decide that, look, this is how we can finance infrastructure to bring the cost down of tomato from Boalugu to Accra to just not more than 20% of the post-harvest cost. Because at the end of the day, failing to do that leads to post-harvest losses. And then you can then liaise with others and say, this is how we add value to tomatoes. And that is how then you then create the market outside. So we build a domestic market and we export. I think that coordination a lot more needs to be done from the policy and governmental level to driving the private sector to come together.
Okay, now let's bring in the AFTA discussion proper into this whole setting. AFTA was expected to have taken off this month. Due to this COVID thing, we have to move it to July. I'm not sure it's still, the July is still coming on.
Well, I don't have the answer. I don't know whether anybody has the answer. I mean, we've written a paper, Michael and I and a couple of others, where we've encouraged the AU to stick to the date, 1st July. I haven't heard any official announcement, so I'm not sure whether, but the secretariat, which the government forced to bring to, because of COVID, is still operating outside Accra in terms of operating from Addis. Yes. But I can see a lot of activity that the government is doing around the building. So there is hope that if the border restrictions are lifted, it's likely the secretariat will take off, and that will make a significant difference to Ghana.
Okay. Yeah. So how do we marry the AFTA thing and then what we're doing to take advantage of this era?
It goes back to what I have said, which is we know the market. I gave you 2 examples, and there are a lot of opportunities we already have. I will not cease emphasizing the need to leverage that opportunity, because, and let me give you a couple of examples. If you know that we have 1.27 billion people on the continent, and if you know that a market can be created, you look at what is the food consumption. You link it to planting for food and jobs. You link it to African Development Bank, and you see there's a huge amount of money for from African Development Bank for what is called feeding the people. Yeah. And that's when you work with the likes of AFSA to see and tell those who are adding value to food that look, the market is there. We will help you identify it. Our embassies are there in each of these countries. We help you identify it. We are talking to Nigeria, etc. We will regionalize it. Therefore, begin to add value and stop producing the raw commodity. It's the same thing that we can do across the various spectrum. If you take clothing, you have 1.27 billion people on the continent who need clothes. That's a huge market. Yeah. But I had the chance to speak to one Ghanaian, what do you call them? Those who make clothes, they have a new name now.
The fashion designers.
The fashion designers. When we were young, we used to call them a different name. Yes, a fashion designer.
Adding the Sims.
Yeah, I buy a lot of things from that shop, and I asked the gentleman, "But why don't you have other shops?" And he said, "Somebody is going to steal his clothes." And I'm like, do you think Gucci, nobody steals his money?
They suffer that
you have to develop a system as how not to your money to be stolen. It's that kind of thinking that we need to inculcate in our people. Otherwise, we will not take advantage of the 1.27 billion people who need clothes, and Ghanaian clothes are good. And because we don't leverage, look, Kofi Annan, the late Kofi Annan of blessed memory, was the Secretary General of the UN for is it 8 years or 10 years? If we had convinced Kofi Annan to wear made in Ghana fabric once a month.
Okay, you want to even move once
a month and say this fabric was made in Ghana. You know how much fabric, I mean, the clothes we would have sold? Yeah. Did you see the congressmen having Kente store? Did anybody say the Kente cloth was coming from Ghana? No. These are the leveraging of simple things which changes the life of the man on the street in Osu. Those are the kind of things I like to talk about. And that's how you take advantage of AFTA. It's not the complex things. Once you do that, you see that somebody is now doing the yarning and building the big factories that turn on the cotton. Then the cotton in the north becomes relevant. That's how we have to coordinate things. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Let's bring in Yofi Grant. Yofi, your thoughts about what David is alluding to?
I think he's got it spot on that CFTA initially will not start with the big high-end manufacturing that we expect it to be. But there are consumables on the continent that clearly should not come from anywhere but the continent. I mean, it's a no-brainer, first of all. The fact that we are going to have a tariff-free market, which will be the single largest market in the world since the EU, in itself is significant in creating opportunity for our small and medium-sized enterprises. I mean, I know, and I do a bit of travel, that very often people speak of Kente very highly, and they can't see, they can't find it, because there's nobody actually weaving Kente for export within the continent. If you go to Born, haven't put themselves as a cooperative, say, okay, we are going to form an export cooperative. Even in agriculture, if you go to Brazil, one of their most powerful associations is an agri association, and I'm told it has about 100,000 members. It is powerful economically, it is powerful politically, and it is powerful socially. And it's made sure that they do get enough food for Brazil and then push Brazil to be an export-oriented agricultural nation. And I think these are not things that necessarily require the capital that we require, but would need a lot more policy and focus. How do we get our business people to work together? And David is right. There is probably less coordination in the private sector than there is in the public sector. I mean, in the public sector, there will be executive coercion to ensure that it happens, because that's what it should be. In the private sector, it's like a free-for-all. People work according to how they feel and how they want. And he's very right. Even the engagement is very limited to, for want of a better word, I hate to use this word, but it's very little. People want to own their small enterprises than to look big and export, because they haven't yet thought about the bigger picture, which is emerging. And I dare say that there are some Ghanaian industrialists who are looking cross-border already. I mean, Casapreco is one. I mean, the drink is as popular as the president of Nigeria. Everybody likes to see Alomo bitters and all the other things that are there in export. When the Nigerians closed their border, it was almost chaotic, not just for the exporter, but for the Nigerian market.
I see.
You know, so there are opportunities. I mean, if you look at EcoBank is in 30 plus African countries. It should definitely be a major facilitator of trade and enterprise. But when I speak of the banking sector, I want to find out how much of the banking sector is supporting SMEs, which significantly, I would say the African economy is probably over 70% SMEs and SMEs. How much of our banking sector is supporting that in terms of percentage? It might be a little percentage. It's now that we are seeing a lot more activity from the banking sector into SMEs, because we are seeing the opportunity of SMEs in the CFTA. I mean, without a doubt, I mean, not even just for African countries. For the global economy, the CFTA is a very important aspect, a new entrant into the global economy. Because, look, I said before, 50 years from now, Africa will have 1/4 of the world's population. It will have over 30% of our mineral resources. It has 60% of the remaining arable land left in the world. So it possibly will feed the world. It has the biggest tract of forest land. So environmentally, it's also safe. You know, and so that in itself is one juggernaut waiting to wake up. Almost all the other markets are returning very little in terms of investment capital. Let me tell you something very interesting. I did an analysis on returns across every market. Africa by far generated the highest returns of over 5% for most investments, whether it's portfolio or direct investments. And as the European countries really contend with how to retain value, even for their pensions and for their monies that they have in savings, they will need to look for new markets, because some of the markets are returning zero, less than zero. The returns on investments are less than zero. That is not the same in Africa. Africa is returning positive returns, and I do concede the infrastructure has not yet been built to make it a fluid and efficient market, but it is coming. And the CFTA is one of the efforts to ensure that Africa, through its rules and tariff-free covenants and engagement covenants, to make sure that Africa remains attractive. Africa also remains a very good market, but also a very good investment opportunity.
Okay.
And so, yes, I think Africa is going to change. And as progressively, decade after decade, we are seeing African economies grow. And I want to reiterate once again, out of the 10 fastest economies in the world over the past decade, 6, and I'm told now it's 7 are from Africa. That is telling a new story. We must confidently embrace that and build it. And sometimes I understand the pessimism, but I think there's a much bigger and better story of opportunity and optimism than there is pessimism.
Okay, Michael, do you want to take off from there?
Yes, so I keep talking about partnerships, and I'm glad both Yofi and David and Ellen have re-emphasized it. And I think, you know, it's extremely important, because we can get government to do all the government needs to do, and government has a lot to do. But not until we begin to see strategic partnerships in industry, we're not going to get anywhere. Our biggest problem with business in this country is the problem of scalability. our inability to build scale. And if you look at the way global business works, it's all about scale. It's really all about scale. And that's why if you understand the importance of scale, then you put all your differences aside and your little empires aside, and you think immediately across different domains. The only thing that gets you scale is when you are partnering and
okay.
So we keep emphasizing partnerships, and it appears to me that one of the reasons why we are not making progress with partnerships in the industry is because maybe we haven't come around to appreciating the idea of scale and scalability.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why the Chinese are able to beat everyone is because they've got scale. And the reason why the Americans will defy everything Donald Trump will say about bring the factories back home and all of that is because they're looking for one thing, they're looking for scale. And so, it's really, when they say in politics there are no permanent friends, the only permanent interest, the rule is probably more, that principle is probably more dominant in global business than even in politics. So you'd have to think about it like that. And the last time I spoke about the need for a partnership of rivals in Ghanaian industry. And we need to think about partnerships like that. If you're looking at your rival who is competing with you over the same market, you stop seeing them as rivals and think about how you can partner them. Both of you become more dominant and more powerful. The CFTA is a scalable opportunity. This is why I'm talking about scalability. It's a scalable opportunity. You can succeed so long as the Ghanaian market is closed and available to you. Once Ghana is a member of the AFCFTA and the zero tariff market opens, you are no longer king over the Ghanaian market. Those who have scale and can build and produce and distribute at scale are going to take over your market locally. So the opportunity that the CFTA brings is a huge opportunity that if we're not going to be collaborating, so long as we have a small domestic market, it's okay not to build partnerships. You can succeed as a little niche business here and there. But once the floodgates of the CFTA open up, those who can win the market are those who can produce at scale, distribute at scale, and produce and price at the levels that only scale, competitive prices that only scale dependent production can allow you to do.
Okay.
So I just want to, because I think we keep talking about partnerships and we don't see it. The industry needs to appreciate the point about scale. Then you partner naturally because it's only partnerships and pooling resources that give you that scale. Number two, I want to talk about e-commerce and the digital opportunity. And I think COVID has made that even more obvious now than ever before. For many decades, we've been talking about the shadow economy. And the shadow economy tends to be associated with the informal sector. The fact that, it's not properly taxable and it's really informal. And that's there's a whole new shadow economy that's emerging in Ghana and across Africa. And that's the digital economy. If you see the amount of business that happens on Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp in the Ghanaian economy, that is not captured in our GDP data. That's not captured in the tax data. You'll be amazed.
Okay.
And there's a whole new shadow economy that's emerging in the digital sector. And I think we need to pay attention to it because that's where the young people, that's where the young entrepreneurs are actively producing, distributing. It's incredible. And I'm sure many of us are familiar with it. That's an opportunity for us to build on that as we're trying to think about how we can take advantage of the AFCFTA.
Okay. All right.
What is going on in the digital sector in Ghana is the same thing going on in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Zambia, in Ivory Coast.
Okay.
So again, just so we can bring it to the level of the ordinary entrepreneur, it's important to see how, because you don't need to travel to Zambia or Botswana.
Okay.
You can do that or online.
Okay.
And all it takes is for you to ship the product.
Okay.
So in trying to get our entrepreneurs to appreciate what a CFTA represents, the digital opportunity is huge. But even more importantly, domestically, we need to see how the likes of GRA, who are trying to, Ghana Beyond Aid, we need to mobilize more local resources. That's a whole area that requires innovation.
Okay.
Just last one, Yofi talked about the Kente opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, just to bring it back to the issue of scalability that I talked about, I've never seen a large-scale Kente factory before in this country. Kente production is still done the way we've done it 200 years ago. And when the Chinese started stealing our Kente, the reason why all our women are going to Makala to go and buy the Chinese Kente is because of scalability.
Yeah.
Because the Chinese produce the Kente at scale, so they can sell it cheap here. The way we produce Kente here, it's not possible to bring down the price point.
Yeah, to have that price,
Where we cannot be wearing Kente, we sell it across. Kente is too expensive. I don't know the last time you tried to buy quality Kente from Bonri, but it's really expensive.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, the Chinese are the ones who are capitalizing on the Kente opportunity and taking advantage of it.
Okay.
And if we're not careful, the same thing will happen to the CFTA. We say we are localizing, we want to localize production. The Chinese and the Indians and the Europeans are going to come and localize the production for us if we don't localize it ourselves. And all we'll do with the CFTA is that we create a huge market for foreigners to come and
take. Yeah. All right, Michael, thank you. Okay.
So just to again, the need for a partnership of rivals in Ghanaian industry is extremely important.
Okay.
A partnership of rivals. If you can't think about it like that, there's no way you're going to ever partner. And the reason why you need to do this is because the CFTA is a scalable opportunity. You can't partner and produce at scale. You're not going to really take advantage of it. This is a chance to build Ghanaian champions. Okay.
All right. David.
Let me make a couple of maybe 3 quick points.
But David, before I let you do the quick points, we're now bringing in our guest on Zoom, so you can join us now so that you can come with your comments and your questions around that. Okay, David.
The first one relates to what Michael was talking about regarding the digital world, which I think you also talked about. I mean, I almost everybody I speak to is on Netflix. I'm not so sure how much taxes GRA gets out of from the Netflix.
Oh, David, you want to take that one too far?
I knew you were going to complain. Because ordinarily they are not resident for tax purposes.
Yeah.
To what extent we are stretching our economy to tap into that digitization that is adding to the capital flight is another. But that's just a point by the way. You know the story about the parable of the 10 virgins? Okay. Now, earlier Michael made a point that nobody really knows when COVID is going to end.
Yeah.
That's exactly where we are.
Yes.
Nobody knows when the groom is coming.
Yeah.
But it is only those who have filled their lamps with oil who are going to. And I said this when I spoke to, I think, one of your sister stations. Or if you are still thinking that you are waiting for COVID to end and make a plan for CFTA, you've almost lost it. Because it is only those who are actually taking advantage of the COVID to prepare for CFTA who will take advantage. We all know about the so-called first mover advantage. If the borders are shut down and you are not identifying the market and scaling and coming together to actually plan so that when they are open you can take advantage, somebody is.
Yeah.
When God gives you an idea, he gives it to other people.
More than that.
Yeah. So this whole idea, I mean, of waiting that we are going to plan. And you know, the private sector, which is the third point I want to make. Anytime I make this, I make this point, I get into trouble with my colleagues in the private sector. We criticize government a lot, which is okay, we have to. But we suffer from a worse problem in the private sector, I mean, than in the public sector. I mean, Michael has been harping upon the point about coming together and scalability in Kente and all those things. What is wrong for the private sector if we came together to create, quote and unquote, a private sector cocoa board type, which aggregates Kente, checks the quality, identify the market, and then can travel with Yofi and sell it in bulk elsewhere. Even at times when banks and government create opportunities, we are unable to take advantage of it. So I think the private sector itself has a huge problem that we at times carry into the public sector and blame only the public sector.
Okay. Helen, I'll let you have the final word on the leveraging on the AFTA in this period?
Yeah, I think it presents a huge opportunity for us. We need to look at how we can really work with the telcos, the fintechs, and the financial institutions to help payments across the sub-region. AfTag also presents an opportunity for us to look at our infrastructure, our railway network, and our transportation, which the banks are ready to really support. We also need to look at how we also change the mindset of our people and also be able to take advantage of what we produce. Most people don't really like made in Ghana goods or made in Africa goods, but very soon made in Africa goods will be all over the world. We need to consciously make an effort to change the mindset of our people so they can accept made in Ghana or made in Africa goods. And I must commend Citi FM on this. Made in Ghana is something that they are really pushing. We all need to push it. A friend of mine went into production of liquid soap. What we did was that we all decided that going forward, we're going to buy liquid soap from her alone. And we're going to give her feedback if it's not the best quality that we want. We started giving her feedback. We brought her expertise for her to leverage on. Those with marketing background told her that, can you look at the filling stations and others so you can put your goods there? We all decided that we are going to leverage on our expertise to support her to succeed. And I think that's what we need to do if AFCFTA is going to succeed. We need to ensure that we are ready to work amongst ourselves in country, around the continent, and also trade amongst ourselves. Intra-Africa trade currently, David was saying it's 18% as of 2018. Some also say it's 17%. Can you imagine intra-Africa trade with all our raw materials? It's just 18%. When the Europeans are around 68%, the Asians are around 52 or so percent. We need to ensure that we collaborate, leverage on each other's strengths, and grow the business in Africa. We can raise to us. And once there are returns, we will look out there in the banking industry long ago, and it's really working now. It's about what we want to do and what we want to focus on.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. We'll take a quick break. When we come, we'll introduce our Zoom audience. They will take their questions and comments, and then we'll read some other questions and comments that have been sent on our social media platforms as well. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Unlock banking with biometrics. Now you can access the ABSA mobile banking app using your fingerprint or facial recognition. Download today. That's Africanacity. That's ABSA.
My name is Dr. Yao Edujemfi. I'm the CEO for Dampon Group of Companies, a pharmaceutical company. We have been operating in Ghana for the past 25 years, and because of the political stability and economic environment stability, business has been moving from strength to strength. I want to take this opportunity to invite local businesses to grow their businesses in Ghana. I want to invite foreigners who are looking for opportunities in Africa to come to Ghana to build their companies in Ghana and grow in Ghana. So this is an invitation to you all. Come grow in Ghana and grow with Ghana.
Shop online, get free swipes, and enjoy greater security with a card that turns banking on its head. That's Africanacity. That's ABSA.
Okay, welcome back to our virtual business forum on trade. I have with me quite a number of people. I've seen a lot of via Zoom, our Zoom audience. We'll be taking your questions in a bit, but let me just run you through the people who are in the studio with me today and also joined us virtually to take some of your questions and comments as well. I have with me Mrs. Ellen Ohene-Afoakwa. She's a Regional Corporate Director, West Africa for Absa Bank. I also have David Ofosu-Dorte. The question is, WTO doing with regard to trade measures?
Well, you know, I hope that the question is not very clear, but I assume that it's referring to measures imposed in these times of COVID.
Yes, by WTO, yeah.
Since the presidency of Donald Trump, as you know, there's been a major, global trade war that's been ongoing even before COVID struck. So the WTO system itself has been very disrupted for the past few years. The Trump administration refused to approve about 3 or 4 of the judges that have been appointed onto the WTO appellate body, and therefore the dispute resolution mechanisms are not even working. They're also suspended as of now. Mm-hmm. And the inability of the WTO to function in the last few years is partly what contributed to the sudden resignation of the WTO Director General just about 2 months ago. Mm-hmm. And as you know, there's the efforts to appoint a new WTO Director General, and Africa is trying to put a candidate forward. So as we speak, the WTO itself has been very disrupted. The system hasn't been able to respond, and that's an important signal to Africa. Look at what has happened in the EU with Brexit. You look at what is happening between America and China and America and everybody else. And Africa is just about the only continent that's moving in the direction of trade integration by rolling out the biggest. So whilst we continue to be watching what the WTO does, the temporary disruption in the WTO system is also an opportunity for us. Because the WTO itself, the rules and mechanisms of the WTO system, well, we all try to play within it, but in the past, it's been some of our, it's posed constraints, much as it has a lot of relaxed rules for developing countries. It also poses a couple of constraints. But the AFTA offers us an opportunity to look, more within. And craft an AFCFTA that works to the needs of Africa. And with the AFCFTA, Africa would have a bigger bargaining power within the WTO system once it bounces back. We hope that it bounces back. It's not obvious. Globalization will never be the same after COVID. It doesn't mean it will end, but the rules will have to be modified. Things will have to change. Okay. And in order for us to influence the rules more positively, we need to go there as one continent, as AFTA. Imagine if we go there not as 55 countries, but we go there as the world's single largest free trade area to negotiate at the table at the WTO. We'll be more influential that way.
Okay. Now let's remember that this the Business Festival is sponsored by Absa. Now, Absa wants you to download the new Absa Bank app to check your balances. You can pay bills, you can transfer money, and shop online. So save while banking with Absa. It's also supported by GIPC, and they have some important announcement for their stakeholders and their clients. And they are saying that they are continuing with their services, including new registrations, company renewals, exempted processing, automatic export trade quota applications, and technology transfer agreement applications. Now, if you want more information on that, you can kindly contact them at pr@gipc.gov.gh or on their social media handles, and that's Ghana GIPC on Facebook and GIPC Ghana on Twitter and Instagram. Okay, so let me take somebody who wants us to explain what AFTA is, because he's hearing it as saying AFTA and he's wondering what we're talking about. So who will be kind enough to explain AFTA for us?
So that's the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that we are talking about. Some people say free trade area, some people say free trade agreement. The area was created by the agreement. So the full is the AFCFTA. Some people say CFTA, some people say AFTA. It's the same thing we are talking about. Yeah.
Okay. I hope that's clear for the viewer who wanted that explanation. This one says, I think we should start executing those plans as a nation and also get someone who is going to make sure these plans are well executed. This one says, good afternoon, Citi. Thanks for the education and enlightenment. Please, I want to go into get help. This is from Daniel Kofi in the Volta region. I think Yofi should answer that.
Well, that's a private initiative of his, and if he wants to go into it, he should follow his dream. I'm usually not very prescriptive on the path that a private entrepreneur must take, because it involves quite a lot. First, he must have access to capital, he must have a business plan, he must have the focus, and he must have the dedication to that focus. So if he wants to go into Gari, I presume that he either knows the supply line of cassava to Gari, and therefore understands the value chain very well. I believe that, well, we have ABSA on the platform right here at the show. If it's financing he wants, if he has a great business plan, he should take it to ABSA. I think that there are many opportunities for young people, and I presume he's a young person, who are looking to do business to get proper advice through either the National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Plan or through MBSSI. They provide quite a bit of education for startups and incubators, so they can get his plan well. But I must always say that the lot of a private business person in this environment is usually very tough. In fact, it's tough everywhere. In fact, global statistics indicate that for every 100 startups, only 10 really survive. And it's those who go through the script and the protocols correctly. So I would encourage him not to leave his dream because he's getting barriers in his way, but to pursue and focus. First, make sure you have a plan that is sellable, make sure you have a supply, make sure you have a market, make sure you have the energy to link the two. Then you have a business. A business is more than a plan, it's execution as well.
Okay, so we'll take a question from Mark, one of our audience from Zoom. Mark, if you can hear us, please go ahead with your question. Mike, I'll mute your mic and then I'm sure you can go ahead.
Okay, sorry. All right, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you very much. Very educative. I'm receiving a lot of information. I just want to say one of the problems we've had over the period has to be financial institutions. So the banks, fine, we see they are coming forth now with new ways to connect with us. Before ABSA became ABSA, I had a bad experience with them, but I must say that I'm enjoying the new face they are bringing to the business. And so kudos to them. Let us know how we can, get more information so that we can, put them into action. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. Okay, let's move to Vincent Musa, if we can, to give us this question. Vincent, unmute your mic. Your mic is on mute, I can see. Yes, so go ahead.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you, Vivian, and good day to your guests out there. It's worth refreshing to be part of this program. Let me go straight to the question. The question is very straight. What can we do to bring more collaboration to create industrialization rather than allow for this individualistic type of meeting we are seeing? I mean, if you hear the guests, what part of the things they said was that you find individuals doing business. But for us to really move beyond where we are, I give a story of the Creative Technology, which is a Chinese firm. This particular firm, if you look at it, not only looked within, it also tried to go out to seek collaboration and partnership. And today, part of that is to be able to get educational tablets for every Chinese child. How can we achieve that? How can we get our businesses expand? rather than concentrate on this type of SME business, but rather looking at industrialization, creating a very big firm that can satisfy the eye of Africa rather than Ghana. Today, if you even look at the nose mask discussion, some of the schools are still saying they have not received the nose mask. But this is what we are talking about. If you have a lot of capacity, some of these things will not arrive. Once the president gives an order, within a day or two, we will have all the nose masks and we shall have to deliver. So that is the intention of my question. Thank you very much, Vivian.
All right, thank you, Vincent. So how do we create the big companies, the conglomerates, that we see elsewhere in the Americas and the China and all that?
I think there are two aspects of that. We are talking about scaling up. Scaling up can occur from two angles. It can occur from the side of one company expanding and even bringing this address into his fold, which lawyers and financiers will call M&A and things like that. The other way it can occur is for entities to remain individual, but nevertheless have their products aggregate. If you look at the economy of Taiwan, it's almost similar to Ghana. You find that there are a lot of small producers, but however, their products are aggregated so they can meet large demands. And we don't need to look far. Cocoa is an example. The average cocoa farmer is not a huge cocoa farmer who is producing $1.8 billion per annum. But when Cocoa Board aggregates it, we spend and syndicate $1.8 billion every year. So we don't have to necessarily ask everybody to expand his factory or expand their farm. We can aggregate. But to do that, you need to have situations where there are entities who check the standards, who check the quality, so that the simple person who makes one chair in Fiela Yingba can aggregate it with the person in Joje, and we can have 1,000 chairs and supply chairs to Parliament, so we don't import chairs from another country, as an example. That's how you have to think about it. It's about the standards, but to expect that overnight we can all find the financing to scale up, it's not going to work. So I think we need to do something about our psyche. For those who want to remain 100% owner of one, we can still leave them at that. To the extent they meet a certain standard and can join to another 100% person, and we meet the work. For those who are ready to expand, we create a horizon for them to expand. It's all about having a market and having people to be able to come together to meet that market. That's how I see it.
Okay, let's go to Joseph. Joseph, you're on.
To what David has just said. In fact, one of the big functions of scalability is market. And that is why I think the AFCTA is a very important construct in this whole conversation. That before you scale, you must ensure that you have the market to take your product, to help you develop. If you scale just for the size of becoming large, you lose out on your own competitiveness. And so scalability is one of those things that requires a market available. But what I can say is that if you look at the African continent and you look at the companies, the number of companies that are doing over $1 billion revenue a year, there are about maybe 370 companies doing over $1 billion revenue a year. Out of that, only about 3 or 4 of them are indigenous. Most of them are multinationals and partnerships from outside. And so I am very clear that AFCTA gives us that opportunity of a market that can push for scalability.
All right. Let's take Joseph's
it's just not for the AFCTA, but also to create companies that can export to other regions.
Okay, great.
Not just within Africa.
I think we get your point. So let's take Joseph. Joseph, if you can hear me, kindly go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you, CCFM, for this opportunity and the education you guys have given us. My question relates to information. And if someone is into animal farming, for example, snail and grass cutter, and would want to export it to the foreign market. For example, I know France would be interested in snails, probably Italy, but sometimes how to go about it, how to identify the companies, the requirements, the processes to export in large quantity. It seems to be very challenging. How do you get that kind of information, especially how to contact the companies and know their requirements how to go through the process from Ghana here and get the items or the product to them.
Okay. I'll take a brief answer so that we can get questions.
I think the caller, and similar to the person wanted to produce Gary and the rest, there are a lot of organizations which help with these things, right from MBSSI to the Federation of Ghanaian Exporters, etc. They should approach this. They are all in the regions and at HQ in Accra, and they will give them a guide. That's the simple answer to that.
Okay. We'll take the next question. There's a gentleman with a hand up. I can't see. No, there's a gentleman in the white shirt with his hand up. I can't see. Next to Joseph. Newton, I believe. Newton, if you can hear me, you can go ahead with your question. Newton, if you can hear me, go ahead with your question. Okay, so whilst we're waiting for Newton.
My question is to Madam Ellen. Okay. My question is to Madam Ellen. I am about agribusiness, and currently I have a strategic plan for agribusiness.
Okay.
And it is now at the idea stage. How can AFSA help me to have a capital to start the business? Thank you.
Okay, there's a direct one for you.
Thank you. That's a fantastic question. And I'm happy with what the first caller said. AFSA, we've changed the way we do business. And we are coming out with a program where we can support startups. So please, you can join our SME Business Club, or you can speak to us after this. We realize that there are lots of young people with brilliant ideas that really would add to the development of this country, but they don't have what it takes to really access financing. So what we are doing at AFSA is to find out and come out with a product that can really help and support such people. So please speak to us after this. We are happy to speak to you. AFSA is committed to the development of Africa, and we are happy to ensure that talents like you with innovative, brilliant ideas get the opportunity to live your dreams. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to give each one of you about a minute or two to wrap up this conversation on the way forward, and some advice you give those in the export as well as trade area in taking advantage of this COVID thing. And let me start with you, David, since you are in the studio with me. I come to Helen, I move to Michael, and we'll wrap up with Yofi.
I think my suggestions, I guess maybe a couple of them. One, we need to domesticate long-term supply chains.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about just domesticating, I'm talking about domesticating long-term supply chains. Because, for example, if you domesticate PPEs, it may be not a long-term supply chain. And I've had occasion to make a couple of comments about from somebody, for example, investing in machinery to produce PPEs over a 10-year cycle. If your amortization cycle to your loan is 10 years, I don't expect that to be wearing masks over the next 10 years. So the kind of markets we should be domesticating are the kind of markets which are long-term supply chains, which replace the traditional supply chains. The other comment I think is worth making is that we need to actually fill our lamps with oil during this period. And how do we do that? We need to identify the markets which are likely to blossom and which are the first part of the 90% of goods to be put in the 5,000 baskets under the CFTA. Because in the CFTA there is the rules of origin, and the rules of origin determines what goods can enjoy the tariff-free, duty-free when the CFTA starts over the 5-year period. So it's not like suddenly you can export sanitizers for a zero tariff. No, it starts at a reducing rate of 20% until it comes to zero. Every year you'll be reducing it by 20% until it comes to zero. So we have to be planning which countries are not capable, for example, of manufacturing sanitizers now. Are they going to need sanitizers over the next 5 years, or is alcohol rather they are going to need? And if so, how do we create linkages to be able to supply that market? That's the long-term supply chain we need to. And if we do it now, we can quote and unquote compete with the Chinese. Then we now come back to see how the public sector can help us bring the cost of production down. And this is the last point we ought to make. It doesn't matter how much you scale up. If the goods are not competitive, they are not competitive. So, for example, if somebody in Kenya can borrow the shilling at 12% interest per annum, and you are borrowing at 25%, 25% per annum, and I hope Ellen will make a comment on it, because Bank of Ghana has dropped the monetary policy rate to 14.5. We are still around 20s. If we don't drop that interest rate, then your cost of production is going to be high. If we don't drop power tariff, the feed-in tariff, our cost of production is going to be high, and after will not give us any advantage. We ought to be thinking about these things.
Okay. Hello.
Thank you. For Africa Continental Free Trade to really succeed, we need to really have the right steps put in place. We need to look at how do we really focus on increasing our productivity and our capacity. And I like what Michael and David said. We need to ensure that we are collaborating and working together to make sure that we are forced to reckon with. And I think it's key. We also need to look at how we can use technology to really help develop agricultural processes and production. Value add is key. We need to also take advantage of the markets that AfCFTA produces. It's a huge market. How do we take advantage of that? And I must say that the banks and financial institutions are ready to support. We need to see people align with what they want to do and also focusing on what they want to do. We've had instances where banks provide financing, and the moment you get the financing, the next thing that you see is the person is building an estate or buying land and all that, investing into things that really doesn't really generate cash flow. It's about cash flow. Once you have the right cash flows, banks will be happy to support you. So I think we need to focus on what we want to do and really take advantage of what AfCFTA presents. It's a huge opportunity to help develop Africa. And I think, as David said, we need to start now. COVID presents an opportunity. What can we start doing? The essential products that we need. How do we scale it up? And what support do we need? And I must say that ABSA is ready to support. We have 500,000 cedis without collateral for you. We have a business club that will provide you with the expertise that you need, build your capacity, link you up with the markets that you need to get into, and also provide you with all the support that you need. I think it's important we leverage on that. Thank you.
Okay. Michael.
I just want to re-emphasize, most of what you've said. I think in order for us to really benefit from after, most of what we've discussed, I'll put it in two main categories. There are the things that we need to do externally, and there are the things that we need to do locally. And then we need to match the two of them. Okay. A lot of what we need to do locally has to do with all that we've said. Improving the operating environment, improving the competitiveness of our industry, both SMEs and big ones, and we need to build more partnerships to be able to scale, because the CFTA is a scalable opportunity, and if you're not producing at scale, which is more competitive, lower pricing, with improved capacity to raise financing and all of that, we're not going to be able to take advantage the way we should. I'll close up with the things we need to do externally. Come back to some of the things I said earlier on. And I'm glad you say that there's more collaboration with the foreign missions, and they're rolling out a more proactive approach. I would like to Yofi make another suggestion, if it is possible at all. I don't know how practical this is. I feel that the GIPC and the Ghana Export Promotion Authority should probably internationalize more than you are now. If it is possible, the GIPC and the Ghana Export Promotion Authority should take over the commercial units of the embassies and foreign missions and run them. Because again, the mindset of a diplomat would always be the mindset of a diplomat. And that's why I don't like the word economic diplomacy, because marketing and finding investment is really not about diplomacy. It's a whole new mindset. And I think that if the folks like GIBC and Ghana Export Promotion Authority, I think there should be a way for you guys to open your own branches in all the various countries where we have Ghanaian missions. And for you guys to take over the commercial units of the embassies and run them, I think it will impact that. And with regards to CFTA, I think these commercial units should be given trade and business development targets. They should become our quote-unquote ambassadors for our industry for the AfCFTA. And every year, they should be given targets in terms of the business intelligence they have to produce with regards to specific products and sectors. They should be giving targets in terms of how many deals they are able to generate for Ghanaian industry. And they should work like business units and take their commission and their cut. That way they can generate more revenue and run their own operations. It should be really like a business. Okay. It's like a marketing unit for Ghana's AfCFTA strategy. That's what it should be. And then finally, the next thing I think we need to do, we need to, and both internationally and locally, we need to incubate, because I don't see a lot of them. We spoke about aggregators. We need to incubate the aggregators, both locally and internationally. Locally, we need them. Internationally, we need them to do the trade intermediation, because our SMEs just need to focus on doing what they do. And they are not going to be able to go beyond the borders to go and find buyers and all of that. I think that's a big missing link in the way we are approaching the CFTA. And I think we need to deliberately and consciously incubate these kinds of businesses. Local aggregators, international intermediary, trade intermediaries, and fund them. We need to commit funding to them and support them to do this. That's the only way. Locally, we can aggregate to scale. Internationally, we can aggregate the buyer contracts, and we'll be able to take more advantage of the CFTA.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Michael. Yofi, your final words.
Yes, my final words, and I don't think I need to re-emphasize some of the bigger macro issues which have been very well highlighted. So I'll just talk about a few of the micro issues. And if you look at the experience of most countries that have broken through in their economies and built very good trading nations and manufacturing nations, they all went through a certain learning process. And so for me, I think this is our learning process now. And thank you, Citi, for this whole Citi Business program, because it's part of the learning process. And even the ability to provide free high school education for our people is one part of the process. The next thing is to infuse business education into our culture, because we don't really have it. We have a great entrepreneur culture, but we don't have a great business culture. And I think it's a culture that you build. If you go to Singapore, almost every taxi driver will tell you exactly what Singapore is about. If you go to China, everybody tries to sell you something in a certain way. We don't have that yet. We need to learn that whole culture. And I think it's time that we do. And that is why this program is a great learning experience for young entrepreneurs. The opportunities are there. I think the platforms are there. It needs a lot more education. We need to put out that education that there are institutions that can help you understand how you transcend from an entrepreneur into a business. And that business is not a stroll in the park, as many people think. That, oh, I'm going to produce this, so let me just go. No, it's a tough, difficult, sacrificial job. But you will succeed if you have the protocols right. And those protocols must come from your learnings that are given to you either by your society, your school, or your community. So I will emphasize business education as one of the missing points that we need to emphasize.
Okay, thank you very much. Yofi Grant is the CEO of the GIPC. We also had Michael Kottoh, is with Confidence. He's also a member of Afro Champions. We also had David Ofosu-Dorte, a senior partner, AB and David Africa, and also Mrs. Ellen Ohene-Afoakwa. She's Regional Corporate Director, West Africa for Absa Bank. Absa Bank are main sponsors for this year's edition of the Business Festival. Also, GIPC are also co-sponsors for the Business Festival, and also citibusinessnews.com. That's your most comprehensive business news website. And to you out there who've been with us for the virtual forums from day one, thank you so much for joining us. The Business Festival hasn't ended. The on-air series still continues tomorrow. My name is Vivian Kai Lokko. Thank you very much for joining us. Goodbye.